know.
It's
Well,
an
we're friends on
exciting
Facebook, so I
adventure.
see all that stuff going
It's
on.
the challenge of a lifetime.
I bet. Yeah, my mom's really mad at me because I haven't had kids yet.
Okay, your mom, I ran into her in Malibu once, and she said, "You've only got one child? Aw, then they're too precious. You need two,
Yeah.
at least."
Yeah, she's like one of those, like the more the better. But yeah, it's actually kind of sad and ironic that she has 3 children and none of us have given her grandchildren.
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah, I know. She's really mad
that's
about it.
hard. Oh, man.
She's really unhappy
That
about
might
it.
not happen in my family either because I know my sister, Jesus Christ, my daughter says she's gay and my son could be gay, could not. I know my son's so far out there.
Yeah.
That knows how he's going to turn out.
Here we are. Wait. Where is Chris? Where is Chris?
But it's great to have 2 kids.
Yeah. Oh, here he is. All right, Chris, there you go. Don't say I never did nothing for you.
Oh, yeah, I was supposed to remind you.
It's okay. I just did it. We're safe.
Sweet.
Oh, let's take a photo before I forget.
Okay, cool. Phone?
Did I leave it in the bathroom? Along with everything else? Okay. We just have to take a picture to
Use it for marketing?
prove. Yeah, exactly.
All right, 1, 2, 3.
Then no. I'm not ever gonna use a vertical.
I'm sorry. But Instagram's all vertical, isn't it?
No,
No?
it's horizontal, opposite.
Instagram?
Yeah.
But
Well, it's box
squarish,
actually.
It's
Yeah,
squarish.
you're thinking about the video. Video is vertical.
Hey,
We're not. This isn't video.
I won't tell you what I do on YouTube all the time and what they some people do compilation of clips on
Yeah.
Instagram of like really voluptuous girls wearing small things.
Yeah.
I love looking at that stuff. Really
So all your time in the industry hasn't
jaded me.
jaded you, because it's jaded the fuck out of me. Maybe I was just never a sexual person in the first place.
I have some gems I can say about this, but we should do it on the air.
Yes, we should. Okay. Okay, we good? All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Today I have a legendary man in the adult industry, and I'm very excited to have him here today. I've actually been pestering him for a little while to get him on the podcast, and finally, he's finally here.
We did talk about it once before.
We did talk about it, yeah.
It was in my head when I...
Yes, and then
Listen
you
to the
promptly
language.
forgot about it, because I don't
Yeah,
know, you might have a
I
whole
know,
company to
I
run.
know, podcast. What's a podcast? Anyway, Jesus, when you asked me, I probably didn't even know what a podcast was.
So I should probably tell you all that it's Jon Stagliano. So, hello, John. I also completely forgot. I've been so distracted this week to tell you that we should put on our headphones.
Our headphones. Okay. There's sound
Oh
coming through
my
these? And we can hear
God.
what's being recorded.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, but my ear
I
is
am
wrong.
not on top of things today.
This is wrong.
I left. This is going to take forever. I left the bathroom key in the bathroom. I forgot to put my headphones on. You have me all aflutter.
Wow. Wow. I hope that's a positive thing.
So, as I mentioned previously, my mother says hello.
Can I turn these down a little bit? This is a little loud.
You don't like my voice?
Oh, yeah.
Screaming in
If
your
we
ear?
can talk like this, that would be wonderful.
ASMR?
Yes.
How does that sound? Is that okay?
That's better.
Okay,
Thank
cool. Because you're one of the few people in the industry that that's still in the industry that my mom recognizes or remembers, because, it's been a long time and it's full of new people. So how long have you exactly been working in the adult industry?
Way before you were born, young lady.
Yeah, I don't know.
I answered an ad at the UCLA Placement Center in 1973 when I was a student there. I was looking for part-time work, and Bill Margold was running Pretty Girl International. You might know who these
Oh yeah, I know who
entities
Bill
are and
Margold is.
people are. And he was looking for girls.
Yeah.
But I answered it, and I said I was a writer also, whatever. I came in, visited him. I wrote a couple stories for his little newspaper that was on newsstands. It was called Yes, was the name of it. And I wrote the first one. He liked it. He published it. I got paid a penny a word. $14.50.
Wow.
And then he sent me out on a job to do a little caning thing. I got paid $35, and I wrote a story about that. And then he sent me out on some other jobs. I wound up doing a little bit of hardcore. I wrote
Now, performing in it or directing it?
performing.
Performing, because you
Oh,
started off as a
no, we're
performer, right?
talking. I was barely 21 years old,
Okay.
and and then I started directing not until 10 years later.
Okay.
So
So how, I mean,
there,
were you ever, did you ever have dreams of getting in the adult industry, or was you just kind of accidentally fell into it?
I was sneaking porn books from my father's place.
Books? What are
Whatever.
books?
I don't know. We're talking the
It's
60s here.
it's
There
the
was.
magazine.
I
It's the
realized that he
internet
had
on
something
made out of
hidden.
trees.
He had something hidden under the seat of his car. We're talking the mid 60s here.
So when you say
And
books, though, you don't
and
mean
I
magazines?
there was a fiction story with a cool cover. There was a newspaper type thing with
Uh-huh.
a couple of pictures in it that I
Uh-huh.
can distinctly remember to this day.
Yeah.
And I think my father realized what I was doing, and anyway, that got shut down.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I've always been interested in porn,
Right.
more interested than possibly is normal, although I've heard that other people are the same.
Yeah.
So, kids jerk off when they reach puberty.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So,
normal part of adolescence.
yeah,
Yeah.
and some people maybe do it to excess, perhaps. Maybe it gets in the way of their life. Maybe I don't know. I did want to be a baseball player, however, I wasn't. I let my addiction to porn. Let's see, do I have an addiction to porn? I don't know. I certainly enjoy looking at it.
Well,
To
I
this
mean,
day.
you've made a career out of it. So, yeah, the whole question of is porn an addiction issue is something that's certainly been controversial over the years. I had Dr. David Lay on a while ago, and he says that it is not a real addiction. I have experience with addiction. I've never had experience with porn addiction. I think anything that releases dopamine and makes you feel good and makes you experience pleasure can be something that can at least be habit forming in a negative way because, as human beings, we're pleasure
Yes.
seekers. I mean, anything.
Yes,
It can be
yeah.
anything. It could be food,
I
exercise.
tend to watch too much baseball.
There you
So,
go. You have addiction.
son would say I'm addicted to it because he wants me to play video games, which he arguably is addicted to. So
Right.
whatever.
Where it's just, we're all battling something.
Yes.
So you started off as a performer, and how did you transition into directing? How did that come about?
Well, I did still picture layouts in the early 80s where I performed halfway decent.
Did my
There
mom
wasn't
ever
much.
shoot you?
Yes, once.
Once.
Once,
Okay.
and I was really horny that day. I had a hard on a lot of the time, like almost the whole time. It was crazy. One of the rare experiences because I'm not very good as
But
a performer.
But isn't
Generally.
wasn't it back then you weren't supposed to have a complete hard on? It was
Yeah,
supposed to be like
well,
a
it was like
75,
supposed to be hidden
like
half the
like
way.
half
That I
half
don't
hard.
know. Hey, with my dick, excuse me, I did want to call my biography "Never a Soul Little Gone So Far" at one point in time, and I might still title a chapter in my biography that. But no, I wasn't that well. I'm not that well endowed, but it's average, just average. It's not bad. It's how you use it, right?
I
And
agree.
I feel like I have a good amount of skill.
Yeah.
But enough of that rationalization. It went well, I thought. It was really fun, and she only used me once, probably because I wasn't that well endowed. I don't know. But
How was the experience?
it was really fun, seriously.
What was
I
she
don't
like
know
to
what
shoot
the
for?
hell. She was very relaxed, I thought.
Yeah.
Easy to work for.
Yeah.
So,
Do you remember who
yeah.
your co-star was?
No, some girl who wasn't, we're talking the 80s here, like early 80s.
Because we probably, unless she was shooting an exclusive for a magazine, which she didn't do very often, we must still have that film.
Well, it was stills, I think.
Right. But I mean, film, like
The
stills
film.
film.
Yeah. Okay.
Film is also
I'm sure
stills.
it's not memorable. Well, I mean, I enjoyed myself. I don't know what the hell.
Do you remember the concept or anything like that, or was it just like a bedroom scene, like an '80s bedroom scene?
We wound up, we did some inside stuff and then we did some outside stuff in a house that was on the beach in Santa Monica and that stretched below the bluffs there. A really expensive house.
Wow, yeah.
And It was interesting.
Do you remember what magazine it was in?
No idea. I never saw it.
Hmm. Okay. I'm
So,
gonna have to try to hunt that down.
yeah.
So you were a performer, but you don't feel that you were all
Yeah.
that great at it.
I was, I would like, do a couple things and get a girlfriend and not do it for, this was in the 70s and there wasn't much work. I mean, there
Right.
were loops, which I did a couple, and then there were films, which I did a couple.
Can you explain the difference between the two?
A loop is just like a sex movie that goes in a peep show in the 1970s, often without sound.
Mm-hmm.
And it would play, they call it a loop because it would loop. It would like play to the end and then it would start at the beginning again in a loop.
And this is
And
where you would go and like put a quarter in and go get your own
yeah,
booth and
yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I did a couple of those. I wasn't great at that
Mm-hmm.
either. Although my picture was in the LA Times in like 76 or something like that, where I'm on my motorcycle, was for a movie called, well, probably not acceptable today. It was called High School Honeys.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, that's
Titus Moody took the picture in front of his house, and it wound up in an ad for, I didn't even know if it was a Pussycat Theaters. It might have been a lower rung adult theater. They stopped running adult movie theater ads in like the 80s
right,
or
right.
something in
Right.
the LA Times.
Okay.
So, I did a few of those. In fact, that scene in High School Honeys was one of the few good scenes I did.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did more than half were probably mediocre scenes, which is probably why I didn't work very much.
Right.
Because I wouldn't hire myself. Come on. Every once in a while, I put myself in a movie, and most of the time it was okay because I was very careful, but most of the time wasn't very good. Even as Buttman, I'm only in a handful of scenes.
Right. I mean,
So
and I think that that's a great kind of, a thing for you to admit because so many guys think they can be a porn star because they like sex or they like porn, but I don't think people realize how difficult it is to perform in front
yeah,
of the camera. It's a
yeah,
whole other
it's
beast.
not like sex.
No, not at all.
It's not the same. I mean, yes, you can have that same response, but when there's people expecting it to happen, it's very different. And I think that really horny guys are much more cut out for porn,
Yeah.
where you can overcome the distractions. That is a fundamental thing. And I was pretty horny, but I probably jerked off too much. I don't know. Whatever. I wasn't virile enough
Right.
to do it very well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it takes like a real focus and an ability to be able to like really zone in and filter out the
yes,
distractions, especially because it's not just about like being hard on command and being able to have sex with somebody that you may not have good chemistry with and being able to open up for the camera, but also having to come on command as well. I mean, there's so many different,
yes, to control it and
yeah,
stuff.
it's
Yeah.
just, it's a whole
I
other
did
thing.
do one shoot for a private thing. Roy Karch directed. I don't know if you know
Oh,
who
yeah,
Roy
I know
Karch
you.
was.
Yeah.
This was 1983,
Uh-huh.
2, something,
Right.
where he hired me with this girl, so sexy, and I was like performing, and we're fucking. Of course, this is not like today's fucking.
Right.
We're fucking, and the guy says, "Well, can you do the cum shot?" And I said, "Yeah, anytime you want." He said, "Well, how about if we do a countdown?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. What the heck?" So we were like, could control it. I'm pretty good at controlling it
Right.
in private mostly. On
Right.
camera, it's not so easy. But
Yeah.
I was on this time, and there was a camera, and there was another guy there, and it was like he was like, this was for a private thing. I don't know. The pressure wasn't there, and I did come right on cue. Just have to brag. So that's that was the high point of my porn career. It was all downhill from there, pretty much.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it all depends on how you look at it because as we mentioned, you became a director and then you ended up like starting and running a very successful company that is still, you know, one of the top companies today. So, how did that come about? What was the
Well,
first thing that you directed and how did that
well,
opportunity present itself?
so Pretty Girl International, which
Mm-hmm.
was not run at the time. Bill Margold turned it over to David House, who was a still photographer. He had
Mm-hmm.
shot me a half a dozen times. I was pretty good at stills.
Mm-hmm.
I was lighter, was a male stripper. I was in the first show at Chippendales,
Really?
1979. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I've had a lot. I entered puberty at the time of the sexual revolution in the 60s.
Right.
So I've had an interesting life in that regard. And anyway, so I did still pictures for David. I did still pictures for other people. And this was 81, 82, into 83. In 83, David was saying, well, there's this thing where people are shooting on video and not film. And it's a lot cheaper. And I have this guy, this photographer or filmographer that I'm working with named Bruce Seven.
Mm-hmm.
You might remember. You don't remember Bruce? Oh God, nobody remembers
I
Bruce.
may not
Poor
know.
guy.
Well, don't forget, my
Anyway,
mom was more entrenched in the photo world than the
yeah,
video world. She did do
yeah.
some movies, but it was really more about photography for her, especially when I started working for her. So I'm more familiar with that side of
Bruce
the
was,
industry.
yeah, Bruce was pretty popular in the late '80s and up
Hmm.
into the early '90s. He did some stuff. And anyway, so Bruce was producing another video. He had worked in the movie studios and stuff, and I met Bruce with David House,
Hmm.
and we concocted a plan
Hmm.
where Bruce would be the cameraman and rent his house and rent his camera, and me and David House would split the movie, and I wound up financing most of it, but it was David's would be the still cameraman for free, and he would
Hmm.
help organize it and get the casting and all that stuff. And the first scene, David was going to be the videographer, the cameraman, and he missed the cum shot because he was worried about Bruce Seven shooting the stills, and they were trading, and he just like said, "Oh, okay, maybe I can't do this,"
Wait, how did he miss it? Was he like
because
somewhere else?
he turned the camera off while Bruce was getting stills, and the actor, who was a friend of mine, came when he wasn't supposed to or something. I don't know. It was,
Oh, because you
I
guys were
mean,
like trading off stills and video
yeah,
kind of at the
yeah,
same
it was
time.
a little different world. People weren't as competent. It's still an issue, you know. You
Yeah,
got to worry about missing the cum shot. If you miss
yeah,
the cum shot, well, it's
yeah.
really
But
bad. So
well, but for stills, I don't know about you actually,
you
but
can fake it.
we fake it with Cetaphil.
Yeah,
So
it's whatever. Fuck. Anyway, I don't like faking it. But in any case, so David was feeling insecure, and he said, "Well, just pay me as a still photographer for these 2 days that we're shooting, and you keep the movie because it was all my money anyway." I was good at saving money.
mm,
I made $1,000 a week in May of 1983 as a male stripper. I did stripping telegrams and I did clubs, and I saved all my pennies. And I also won a dance contest called Shake It Sexy, which was on the Playboy channel,
uh-huh.
and we split a $5,000 prize. I won 252,500 with this girl. We did
Uh-huh.
a couples thing, and I needed that money. I
Yeah.
didn't think I was going to need it, but I wound up needing it because editing cost as much as the movie. The movie cost 4,000 to make. The editing cost 4,000 because
Really?
we edited at a production house.
Right.
They were doing Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous there
Yeah.
at the same time. I don't know, Robin Leach's thing,
Yeah.
who subsequently became a friend of mine and an acquaintance in Vegas.
Oh, interesting.
Anyway, so that was expensive to rent that, and we shot on U-matic tape and whatever,
Hmm.
and it was a horrible movie, but it's called Bouncing Buns. We had a pretty good star, Kelly, who wound up crying in the middle of the last scene when she said she wasn't sure she wanted to do it, and I don't know what the fuck.
Oh dear.
And then she was fine, and she went on to become a star in the business for a while. But this
Huh.
was her first day shooting, was her first scene. She'd only done Girl Girl for Bruce Seven before that. This was
Right.
'83.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
was no porn business. People were treated us more like criminals back then. I
yeah.
hate to say it.
Yeah.
But then she understood the business and got into it. I mean, it was another guy. The scene she was doing was with another male stripper friend of mine that I knew,
Right.
who was a really horny guy
Right.
with
Right.
with much bigger dick. Anyway, and Woody Long was his name, his
Okay.
stage name. So
Don't remember him.
no, I don't think he would.
No. So you did that movie, and then
Yeah.
and then did you?
So I wound up owning it.
Okay.
I said to Bruce Seven, help me edit it and help me sell it, and I'll give you 10% of the gross. And I did.
Hmm.
And I spent $8,000 on that movie. Got back like 24,000 with no foreign sales, no ancillary. That was only from a royalty deal with VCA.
I was gonna ask who
And
distributed it. Okay,
and then
VCA.
VCA bought out my remaining royalties at some point in time. 2 years later, the
Hmm.
money had gone down, but you could make a lot back then if you
Hmm.
and I we made Bruce and I became partners then after that,
Right.
and we made movies together for a
Right.
while, and then Bruce got the deal to do the first contract girl exclusive movies for Vivid, which was a brand new company in '84.
Hmm.
Ginger Lynn was the star,
Oh wow.
and Bruce shot those movies, and I went off and shot stuff for different companies and sold them. I'd shoot them for like, $8,000, $10,000 and sell them for $12,000, $13,000,
Hmm.
whatever. And I did that for several years in the '80s, and I got better and better at that
Right.
to the point where I also started getting rid of production people because I found that a more intimate set, from my point of view as an
Hmm.
actor, was always better. I
Right.
didn't want to have a boom man, in there. Why not put the mic on the camera?
Right.
We had a videographer. Do I really need a videographer? Because I can see exactly what's going on in the
Right.
viewfinder. It was a little bit more difficult then, and I might have messed up some shots, but did I really need a videographer? Kind of not really.
Yeah.
So, and I could do the PA work myself, and then I whittled that down to shooting one scene a day if I wanted to. I was the first person, I think, to do that. The standard before was you shoot the whole movie in one day, or you do
Yeah,
it in
which
2
is
days or
crazy
something.
to me.
So one of the many things I'll brag about today is that I think I was the first person who did for mainstream companies the idea of shooting one scene a day, the best possible scene you can shoot with a girl, because in the 80s, people would pay more money for features.
Right.
And if it was considered a loop, like I was talking to you before, which would
Right.
be just a sex scene
Right.
by itself, like a vignette today, that sold for less money. You couldn't get as much in the marketplace. So
Right.
the people who were buying my movies, and this was 83 to 89, end of 88, whatever, I was selling these movies to VCA, Caballero, VCR was a company I sold to. And then in 88, I shot a couple movies with my own money. I was supposed to sell it to VCA. They said they couldn't cut the soft version. I said, you're crazy, and I wound up cutting a soft version myself for these two movies a year later, easily. That's my vindictive self, but it was actually really good because at the time I was talking to somebody named Ed DeRue and Linda Corso. They had Totally Nasty Video, and before that they started Foreplay, which went on to be run by Ed Powers. Was bought by Ruben Sturman, actually, and Ed Powers was the figurehead, and Ed Powers took it over, and Ed Powers did Dirty Debutantes 1
Right.
through 599, or maybe they might still be going, I don't really know.
Right, which is, if some people know a little bit of their porn history, that's was the first scene that Jenna Jameson ever did, was a Dirty Debutante.
Yeah, a lot of girls did their first scene, because
Yeah.
he had like an in with Jim South, and he
Yeah.
would get the, you know who Jim South is?
Of course I
So,
do.
oh, good.
Are you going to his birthday, like next?
Oh my God, no, I haven't heard.
He's a birthday party coming up.
Oh
My
man,
mom and I
what
are
is he,
going.
like 75 or something
No,
like
he's
that?
like 80 something.
80 something.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know, I
should
haven't seen him
go.
in forever. Yeah, we're going. My mom and
used
I,
to make-
like weekend after next, I think. So I wanted to have him on the show, but he's, he's like, he's significantly older. But
Yeah.
I mean, if anybody's got stories, man, it's Jim South. For those of you who don't know, Jim South was the agent, the
Yes.
only one in
For a
town.
long time, the only one, really.
The only one.
Well, Reb was a competitor of his,
Yeah,
who
but-
I work with, but
Right.
not serious
Not,
competitor.
yeah, and now, I mean, the industry's flooded with different agencies, but back in the day, there was only one place to go, and that was Jim South.
Yes,
Yeah, it's crazy.
world modeling.
Yep. And he had those books of Polaroids that you would go in there and you'd look through them all.
Yeah,
and
yeah, oh, all those
nuts.
Polaroids.
Yeah, yeah.
I had my picture in there once. That
You know,
was really
I
one.
wonder those Polaroids. I feel like they would be worth so much money now.
Well, the old Ginger Lynn Polaroids and all the other stars of the time.
Yeah.
Christy Canyon, people like that,
Yeah,
all started around that time.
yeah. You know, my mom's actually got a whole side business now where she's selling original chromes from old shoots. And people are, like, collectors are paying a lot of money for it.
Oh my God, we
It's
trashed
insane.
all our chromes.
Nope.
We threw them away.
No, man, that was a
You
bad
can make
idea.
money
You can.
selling chromes.
Yeah.
We had all boxes.
It's
and
so
boxes,
weird because
warehouse
it's,
full of them. This was like 4 years ago.
yeah,
We
it's
just
so
threw
weird
'em
because
away.
it's come full circle. So now the film itself is valuable because they're originals. And
Wow.
they're nowhere else, and it's crazy. My parents
have-
totally have a new business selling their film.
I have the original film, 35 millimeter film of Fashionistas in our server room, actually, because it's cool.
Yeah.
And we were going to throw it out, and we didn't.
Do not throw it out.
Do not throw
Do
it out.
not throw it out. There's a whole
Okay.
market now for original film. So
Wow.
I'll talk to you about it afterwards.
Yeah, thanks.
I definitely want to get to Fashionistas because that was like
Okay.
a really big thing, big production of yours. But okay, so you were doing you were directing these movies, you were working for other people. How did Evil Angel come about?
Well, Evil Angels was the name I used. I published a little porno newspaper in '82. This was a year before I did my first magazine, and I picked the name Evil Angel because I was Evil John in male strip shows, and I liked the combination of evil and angel.
Right.
So I put that together in '82, '83. David House was shooting, and I produced a movie with him, sold it, became partners with Bruce Seven. We did like 5 or 6 movies, went out on my own, sold, did another 20, every 6 weeks I do a movie or 2 movies, I don't know. And I edited them myself. I learned how to edit. I bought my own equipment. Throughout the 80s, I sold, made a few bucks. The 80s were up and down time, but mostly much easier to make money than today.
Yeah.
But I had some technical skills. I learned how to become a decent cameraman.
Right.
There was no autofocus on cameras, so you
Right.
had to focus yourself, of which I've had it attached right now, and I can't see well enough right now to do that, so thank God for autofocus. But that was through the 80s. I did my 30 or 30 some movies and stuff like that, and then VCA didn't want to buy those 2 movies I shot in '88. I kept those. I knew Ed DeRue because me and Bruce had done some stuff for him. He helped me get started. Linda Corso, his wife, was my salesman. Our first release was January of '89,
Wow.
and that was Dance Fire. And I did 8 movies that year, which continually started to sell a little bit more and a little bit more until the summer. And some of them were more complicated features. All of them were stories, oh, yeah, close-ups here and storytelling, and it was really intriguing to me. I did my own editing. I really liked it. In the summer of '89, I said, well, I got this other idea I want to try, this lower budget. It's first-person POV. I'm in the movie as the cameraman, which was kind of a variation on an idea someone else had suggested, where people were looking right into the camera and you recognize the camera. So I wanted to do that, but I was a better cameraman, and I wanted to do handheld and stuff. And I combined it with another fetish idea, which was a butt fetish idea.
Right.
I thought butts were undervalued. To this day, I think maybe they're undervalued. I don't know. People were into big tits and not into ass so much
I
because,
don't know. I feel like butts have had like the.
they've had
Oh yeah,
a
they're
great
coming.
run for the last 20 years plus.
Like I feel like people are really into butts now. I mean, it's
But
becoming bigger.
1989, not.
No,
Where
you're right.
people wouldn't admit it, except guys would look, construction workers would say, oh, that girl looks like 2 puppies fighting under a blanket,
Yeah.
with the cheeks bouncing back and
Yeah.
forth. Anyway, I knew that from personal experience, what I liked and what other people like to look at. So I said, well, let me combine these 2 ideas. I'll do first-person POV and I'll do a butt fetish movie. And my girlfriend at the time, because Batman was out the summer of '89 also, she said, well, why don't you call yourself Buttman? And I said, oh, man. This was Brandy Alexander. I don't know if you remember Brandy.
Yes, I do.
Anyway, she was smart. She was my girlfriend at the time. And I said, I don't know if I want to call myself that in the movie or call it that and whatever. And I said, okay, we'll call it The Adventures of Buttman. And it became a big hit.
It became a big hit, and a
Yeah.
lot of people credit that with being some of the first Gonzo scenes and kind of introducing the whole premise of Gonzo,
Well,
where you recognize
yes,
the camera.
The camera. There's, I could talk forever about Gonzo, but I'm credited with starting Gonzo
Right.
because Bobby Hollander, though, did an interview thing where girls would look right into the camera in
Right.
some of the scenes, and that one might have been '87, something like that. There was a guy I ran into who used to shoot film of girls giving themselves blowjobs, and it played in theaters, and I actually saw a couple of them.
Okay.
So it's not like girls looking into the camera was brand new, but it was hardly exploited at all.
Right.
I had seen somebody taking stills where on the cover they had this guy with this big dick and the girl's got a dick in her mouth and she's looking right into the camera.
Right.
And you'd never seen that before, and it just stood out like crazy in this bookstore. And I said, that's what I want to shoot.
Right.
And that's what The Adventures of Buttman became, being sexy right into the camera. With the addition of what Hunter Thompson did in interviews and books was he interjected himself into the interview, like his evaluation of the interview subject and stuff like that. And AVN came up with the word gonzo to apply to what I was shooting, which was,
Which they borrowed from the Hunter S. Thompson
Yes.
journalistic.
because
So-
gonzo writing was
Right.
what that was called, so they
Gotcha.
called it gonzo filmmaking.
Right.
And because I'm looking with the camera, oh, that's pretty, oh, let me look at your tits, oh, okay. I'm
Right.
moving the camera up and down and examining the girl's body and evaluating it, or walking down the street. And my premise was to be as believable as possible and as real as possible. That was my goal in all my Buttman scenes, with the addition of storytelling and weird gonzo stuff, weird vignette stuff, what would be called vignette today.
Right.
Not at all like what Ed Powers did. Who did 10 months later, Ed Powers did Bus Stop Tales, which had a recognition of the camera and a guy picking a girl up at a bus stop, and the girl's looking right into the camera. Not really done the way I was doing it,
Right.
but pretty much contemporary to me. Also, it was in the air to have imperfect camera work. There were these commercials on TV in the summer of 89. This was 88, 89. God, I'm getting old. I can't remember the years. Summer of 89, where like the camera would zoom in and would shake a little bit and would move. Oh, there's the subject and stuff. The demand of being like perfect camera work
Right.
in commercials on TV was changing. People understood that it was a camera and that it moved to the right subject. And if you had an intelligent cameraman, you could look like you were being awkward, but then it would go into what you really wanted to see.
Right.
And that was done for effect. So that was in the air at the time.
Right.
Geraldo Rivera was following cops around with a cameraman, which was reality kind of gonzo news reporting
Right.
and stuff. That was being done in 88 too. So it was in the air what
Right.
I did, but I was the first person to exploit this idea.
Yeah.
I'm going to take credit for it.
We're gonna give you credit for it. It's okay. You can take the credit. Take it.
Okay.
So then you moved on and you created Fashionistas, which was also a Las Vegas show as well as a
Yeah.
very popular movie. And that was something entirely different. What came first, the movie?
Oh, the
show?
movie.
Okay, that's what I
But
thought.
my dream had been, in fact, I got into porn explicitly with the idea that I wanted to do a dance show, that I wanted to finance myself. And I'm lying on the beach in like the spring of, or towards the summer of 83. And I'm thinking, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I've been a male stripper for a few years. I just turned 30 years old. I need to do something. I was publishing this little porno newspaper, but I wasn't making much money on that at all. And I decided, okay, I'm going to produce a porn video that this guy David House had suggested doing. And my goal is to make enough money to do a dance show, to do some serious art, not just trashy porn, but serious art. And that's what I wanted to do, you know. And so what was I trying to say? The the purpose of my career was this dream to do this dance show, which was always in my mind. So between the summer of 83 and the summer of 2003, I made more and more money. And then I did this movie, which I shot in 2002, which was Fashionistas, shot on 35 millimeter film. I didn't even do the budget. I had always done a budget. Okay, I'm going to spend this much money on the movie, probably, yeah, can I get it back, whatever. I was so successful doing Buttman, and Evil Angel was doing pretty good. We're talking the early 2000s here.
Right.
That I didn't have to worry so much. I knew I wanted to do something really good, so I wound up spending like $500,000 on Fashionistas and thinking I'll never make my money back. In the BTS, you can hear me saying, yeah, I'll buy that Aston Martin if I make money on this movie, which I thought was a crazy idea that I
Yeah.
would make money on this movie. As it turned out, I tripled my money or something like that. I mean, we sold 100,000 pieces of that at
Wow.
double price because it was 2 discs, and we just said double price. And people wanted it because it was popular, because it was well done, and it had Rocco Siffredi as the star, and it had a Belladonna as the star. I mean, the casting was really fortuitous, in addition to Taylor St. Clair, who was really, really good as the foil in the three-way love kind of thing that we did. She was amazing. And I couldn't have done that movie and had it be as good without her,
Right.
with any one of those 3 people. And then it just worked. And I had a cinematographer who was a Buttman fan, who would send me a fan letter in like 92, and we did face dance together, and he had this different way to light. He used Kino flows. Nobody was using in 1992. Everybody was
So-
using standard lights.
So funny because
So that's
everyone uses Kino.
everybody
now.
uses Kino
Yeah.
flows now. What it's kind of moved on to LED lights and stuff like
Right.
that, but they're similar.
Yes.
So anyway, that was the beginning of that. And so he came to me, or I was still in touch with him through the 90s, although we didn't work together after 92 until 2002. And I said, I want to do this film. I need a good cinematographer. He looked at my script. He said, well, what is the relationship between these girls? It's not defined enough. So I wrote more, and it was more demanding. And that was a huge growing experience for me, storytelling-wise and stuff, because the script became really good. The dynamic between Belladonna and Taylor St. Clair worked out really well, and Rocco was great. And it was designed as an introduction to rougher sex, too, to the idea of fetish sex, which implied role-playing and power exchange and things like that.
Right.
It was just an introduction. I mean, the whole idea of the Fashionista show is that there's this mainstream fashion designer, kind of like Versace or somebody like that, who wants to branch out into doing fetish clothing. So he's auditioning, looking at DVDs of it. But you don't know that that's what's happening at the beginning. You just see this weird thing with girls in a fashion show and there's clothes being ripped off by people who invade the stage, and then they've got fashionistas on their latex clothes, and then you realize you're watching a video and that it's not really, it's all staged and it's a promo video and whatever. I love the beginning of movies because you can do so many things at the beginning because you haven't set up obligations. You can you can develop surprises
Right.
at the beginning of a movie in ways that you can't do later on when
Right,
you've
right, right.
established characters.
Yeah, that's true.
That worked out well, all sorts of things. So I made all this money on fashionistas, and I thought, well, what am I going to do next? Maybe I'll do a big movie. And then I thought, well, I really like some of the music in fashionistas that I owned and whatever, and maybe I want to do a dance thing with it somehow. And I went to Las Vegas, and I had friends who lived in Las Vegas who I'd been male strippers with, and who I don't know, some other acquaintances that I knew. And I went to all these cheap titty shows, like Fantasy Girls, which is still playing.
Yeah, it
at
is.
the Luxor,
It
that
sure
was
is.
playing at the time. I looked at that, and I looked at these other things. There were half a dozen of them. And I said, well, I can do that a lot better, and I'll put a story in it and stuff like that, and it'll be sexy and more interesting. And that's what I did.
And where did it play?
It played at it was a long development thing, but it wound up going into what was a new nightclub at a place called Crave. It had been called the Blue Note, which was a jazz club. It went out of business. It was on the edge of the Aladdin Hotel, which turned into Planet Hollywood, and they were remodeling it. I had money to burn, so I invested in the whole nightclub restaurant idea.
Oh, wow.
I lost a fortune, but I got to build, though, the stage. There was a stage there. There had been a play there when it was a club, and the stage wasn't very good. I built it. We put these big gold hands, and platforms on top. I hired 3 or 4 aerialists. I always had in the show were aerialists. Like performing on silks was a relatively new thing at the time. And we did a 2-girl thing on silks, a sexy kind of thing. That was integrated into all these story numbers. I rewrote the fashionista story to be more softcore, so a little bit fetishy, but I rewrote the organization of it, but maintained the whole love conflict thing throughout the whole thing. Really, just the center was redone a bit, but the basic structure of the movie Fashionistas is what got translated into a stage show, and I spent millions on it, and it was my dream always to do a dance show, and I did it, and it got well reviewed, and not that many people came because I don't know. I mean, we made deals with ticket sellers and stuff, and we couldn't get into the front box office at Planet Hollywood or Aladdin because there was this David Sachs guy who had this theater in the back. He already had that locked up with his shows and stuff, and
Right.
so marketing was a little bit tough. So many marketing meetings for
Yeah.
years. I mean, the show played for 3 years and 6 months or 8 months or something like that, and lost money.
Are you glad you did it then?
It was the best thing I ever did in my life. It was really an expanding thing in terms of my abilities to solve problems and to be creative as an artist, and also to do dance, because I had been studying dance. And while I was becoming a male stripper and stuff, I was taking ballet class. When I was 20 years old, I started taking modern at first at a school in Illinois, and then when I went to UCLA, I took all the modern dance classes you could take for non-majors. And I started taking ballet and jazz, and I worked as a professional dancer on tour once in like 77 to 78. I wasn't very good, but I was okay. There were girls in dance, and there were no girls. I hate to say it, but when you're a young man, 20, 25 years old, you want to position yourself where you can find a woman.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like a big motivating thing. And
Right.
girl dancers were really sexy to me, so it was very attractive. But that was kind of the beginning. Very early on, even at UCLA, I realized I really liked the art of movement and bodies and stuff. And I think my understanding of bodies and movement has been of enormous help to me as a pornographer and a photographer, because I can look at a person and a girl and interact and find good sexy shots
Yeah.
easier because I have a body of knowledge and an understanding of the body of the female body that
Right.
other people don't have.
I find that girls who have a background in dance, whatever kind of dance it be, whether it be ballet, jazz, or exotic dancing, tend to be better performers and definitely better models.
Well, a really good exotic dancer who's really sexy, who knows how to work her body,
Yeah.
is is really generalizes to mainstream dance also.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are girls that study ballet and guys that study ballet and they're very stiff because
Yeah.
ballet can be a really good exercise, but it's not emotional in the same way.
Right.
And then there are some dancers that are really good emotionally, but they don't have the technique.
Right.
And the best dancers do both, like Nureyev or Baryshnikov. It's like emotion and dance, and they can communicate, and you can feel the movement through their body, and it's one with the music.
Yeah. And porn and performing and sex is like a dance itself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, it's like shooting it's a live performance
Yeah.
too. It's very much like stripping and improvising
Right.
in a way.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, great. We're gonna take a quick break and then we're gonna come back. We have a lot more to talk about.
okay.
So be right back, guys. Can I get you anything else?
No,
Okay.
I'm not talking too fast for you.
No, you're great.
I figure there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I know. So you're good.
Hang on one second, I gotta switch the battery on.
Okay, perfect time to stop then. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna. Don't forget, we're still streaming live. Just so you know.
Ah, we're still streaming live.
Yes,
Where's
we
the
are.
camera pointed?
We are. This will not be in the final
Looks like it's
version.
pointed down. They have a really good shot of the cups.
No, I promise you're in it.
You promise
Don't
I'm in
you
it?
worry,
I don't
you're
see
in
a
it.
monitor. I have no idea.
You're in it.
Patreon customers are looking at us right now. I can talk about Chris, my guy Chris. Get back to work. What are you doing looking at this shit? You know, I was wondering what you were thinking when you wanted to watch this during the day when there's so much to do. You're editing a movie, right? He's editing a movie called I Am Riley, which is
Oh yeah, he
brilliant.
actually mentioned.
It's really
he
good.
mentioned to
It's
me that
really
he was
good.
working with her right now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's really good.
yeah, she's great. Yeah,
So
yeah. I thought that was an interesting. That would be an interesting segue.
Sweet.
Let me know you ready. You good?
Yeah,
Okay.
good.
Cool. What time is it, by the way?
It is, 11:50.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Okay, cool.
I'll talk as fast as I can.
No, 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 you're fine.
No?
My next guest is coming at 2, so
Oh,
more
okay.
than enough time. I always give myself a buffer.
Yeah, you need lunch and all, or
Yeah.
a break.
I actually don't. I didn't bring lunch. Had egg
I have
whites this morning.
I have a
Can I have your banana?
You can have my
Only
banana.
if I can eat it sexily on camera.
You got. It was purchased yesterday.
I really am. I'm okay. I feel like you need that banana more than me.
My gums are feeling fine, so I'll eat it right now. But no, I don't need it. I'll eat it in the car later. It's
Okay.
I'm feeling okay.
Okay, good.
We're rolling.
We're good? Okay. All right, we're back. So I wanted to talk to you about, so first of all, you were diagnosed with HIV back in
97
97.
February, beginning of
And then your wife, Trisha Devereaux, also Karen, I know her as
Yeah.
Karen. She also became positive, but that was through the Mark Wallace situation,
Yes.
right? And that was not how you contracted it, correct?
No. I
So
was,
can you explain, because not a lot of people don't know about the Mark Wallace controversy, which was a big fucking deal.
yeah.
And that was the last time I think that we've had an HIV transmission on set, correct?
No, 2004.
Oh yeah, you're right.
4 or 5 people.
Ter-
But since 2004,
We've had none.
There's no incidents that's been documented, or there are a few people that have been positive. They've all been trying to get in the business or
Right.
back in the business,
Right.
and were not able to because they were tested. But nobody tested after working and got it.
Right. Yeah, there was that's been a lot of confusion when, there's a big headline about like positive HIV case in the adult industry and we have a moratorium. A lot of people will take that to mean like, oh, see, like there's disease riddled and they're infecting each other, but that's not true because a lot of these cases have been, well, all those cases since 2004 have been the testing actually working and catching
Yes.
people
Yes.
before they go
Yes.
and they perform with other people and infect anybody
And
else.
it's only 3 or 4 cases anyway.
Right, exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So can you tell us a little bit about the Mark Wallace situation?
Well, I knew Mark. We were both doing still pictures at the same time in 82 and 83. He was a
Right.
friend of mine. He was in several of my movies in the 80s. And I understand he had a heroin habit and was shooting up, and perhaps that's how he got it. I don't know. People often will search for explanations that are slanderous because they
Right.
make sense. And maybe that does make sense. Maybe it's true. I'm hesitant to say that. I do know that for a fact he had a heroin habit, and he was altering his tests from what I've heard. I know
Right.
none of this stuff firsthand.
Yeah.
I do know that he had a scene with my wife. This was 9 months after I was positive, and she had been working for a long time. And we did sporadic testing in that time frame. It wasn't required all the time, but I was getting tested all the time. By all the time, I mean every couple of months, which nobody was, there were no requirements for a test, but,
Right.
until after my wife got it.
Right.
And Mark was altering his test
Right.
because there was some confusion and controversy that he played with to justify in his head what he was doing. I don't know,
Right.
that he said, well, I haven't given it to anybody so far. How can I continue? And
Right.
it's true, it's really hard to spread.
Right.
However, he apparently did to several people, including my wife. And no, it's a really sad situation.
Yeah.
It's interesting psychologically to think about that.
Right.
Because what would you do in the situation where you desperately needed money and you thought maybe you did, maybe you didn't? I could just blank out my mind and not think it through. Just what happened with the syphilis outbreak,
Right.
of which there's only been one that I know of.
Right.
In the time that I've been in the porn business. So it's, I do know the performer seemed to be behaving in that manner through an interview he did.
Right.
So, same with Mark. And he went, he was friends with some people and he worked, and he died a couple of years ago. I
Yeah.
don't remember what he died of, but treatment is better.
Yeah, there's a lot has changed. I mean, both you
Well-
and Karen, your viral load is now so low that it's undetectable, right?
I've been undetectable since 3 weeks after I found out I got it. I
Right.
never had a viral load that was very high
Right.
until I did take a drug vacation once, 2014, and the virus came back, and I went back on the meds. So for 5 years, I've been non-detectable again. And
And it hasn't affected like your health or lifestyle in any.
not one little bit. My T cells have always been really high. I've never gotten sick from it or anything like that.
Right.
My wife, on the other hand, got it at a time a year later when they had realized that, well, it's not a cure, because they thought that taking the meds would be a cure. And they thought, well, no, maybe it's better if you don't start taking the meds right away, and that you make sure you don't blow your bullets against it, so to speak. Your body could maybe, find resistances to some of the meds. So she
Right.
didn't, and I think that hurt her long term, but she's still doing fine. She started taking the meds before, when she got pregnant, and she started taking the meds. She went to non-detectable right away. The doctor who was supervising the situation said, the chances of her passing it on to the child are like 1 or 2%, and possibly that 1 or 2% is only because the mother didn't take her meds the way she was supposed to. They figured at least that many people don't take the meds anyway. And so we have 2 children, and they're negative, and she's been negative all this time. So her T cells aren't as high as mine. That could be more natural, but she's healthy and fine.
Right.
So, and then you can't spread it when you're non-transmittable. Although that's another story. I knew that it would be really hard for me to transmit it from the beginning, and that's what all the doctors always told me, and that only made sense. But no one ever did a study until they did a couple studies in the last 3 or 4 years that show
Right.
that in fact, you can't spread it
Right.
when
Right.
you're non-detectable.
Yeah, there's been a lot of, I think misunderstanding and misinformation around HIV, and there's been so many advances now, but there's still a lot of stigma surrounding it, and that kind of really was brought to you when Katie Summers sued you in 2009 for when she
that
did a
was
Buttman
really
scene with
Well,
you.
she didn't sue me in 2009. She sued me in 2011 or 12 or something like that, and it went to,
Was the scene in 2009?
the scene was in 2009.
Gotcha.
She started dating Rob Black some year or 2 after that. When he realized she had done a scene with me, she said, "Whoa, he touched you, whatever, maybe you should say that you went through all this emotional stress." So she sued me 2 years later, just within the window actually, she said she found out in like 11, and then within the year time after that, she filed a lawsuit saying that she had found out 2 years after we shot the scene. So you have to file a lawsuit within a year or something like that.
Right.
So that worked out that then she could then sue me because, in fact, it was 3 years or so after we had had any contact with each other. And so because she said that she found out and went through all this emotional stress, she was suing me for the emotional stress. And then we did depositions, and my lawyer pointed out, well, you were tested 40 times after you did this scene where he touches your leg once. In
Right.
the scene, if you look at the scene, I touch her leg once.
So for people
Anyway.
who don't know, the Buttman scenes, you act as the cameraman and you also like touch the girls,
Some-
but like you don't ever
There's no
touch their
fingering.
genitals and no
there's
fingering. It's always like
Yeah.
external boobs, butt, hand
Yeah.
situation.
It's no finger fucking or anything like that.
Right.
And in fact, she was brand new in the business. I didn't feel it was appropriate for me to tell her I had HIV, so the only thing I do is I help to hold her leg open, and I think I arrange her panties once. That's it. And because she was brand new. A girl who'd been in the business for a longer time, who knew I had HIV, I have grabbed their butts a little bit and grabbed their tits a little bit. And all consensually, obviously, talked
Right.
about and whatever, and asked. But so my lawyer pointed out that you had like 40 tests since you did the scene. So
Right.
there was never a moment where you thought you might have HIV because you knew. First of all, you said you didn't even know he had HIV until 2 years later, and then you had 40 tests in the meantime. So
Right.
you were tested 40 times in between. So there was never a moment when you could have had any emotional stress because you had all these tests.
Right.
And then she started crying on the deposition. It was sad, and Rob Black was there. I wasn't actually there. My lawyer told me about this. I mean, I think she was used by Rob, to tell you
Right.
the truth.
How did
So-
that whole thing make you feel? I mean, that must have been.
Well, I don't think people are perfect, and I
Right.
realize that there's going to be conflicts in the world. And carrying myself, I have always been careful to be completely honest with people and not behave in ways that I had seen many people behave, because I think that if you lie to people and you create false images or anything like that, you're vulnerable to all sorts of stress and conflict. So I try and be myself completely and be completely honest with people all the time.
Right.
So I've had very few of those situations, and I knew that I hadn't caused her any stress. I knew that even if she knew I had HIV, I hadn't done anything that was dangerous or anything like that. So I was never worried that anything real would happen.
Right.
So it wasn't a big deal. I mean, Rob Black said a lot of bad things about me. I thought it was kind of interesting. he was a character.
Yeah, he
But,
certainly
you
was.
know, he came along at an interesting time in the late 90s, and what he said and what he got indicted for, and went to jail. And he was mad at me. He was mad at me because he went to jail for a year and I didn't,
It was for obscenity, right?
for obscenity.
Right.
But he did a PBS documentary before he was indicted where he said, come and get me, basically. I'm going to shoot a girl being raped and killed, which is what he did. And that's what he got indicted and convicted over.
Wow.
And, you know, that's pretty extreme.
Yeah.
It's art. So and I believe in free speech, and I believe in free art, and I think that freedom always leads to good results. And that, you know, and people would see that, and I think that criminals who see criminal behavior, in mainstream movies show criminal behavior all the time.
Right.
But, you know, in order to make the criminal behavior have power, you have to show the victim.
Right.
And then the victim becomes real to me because you've seen it in art. And most of the time when a criminal is a rapist or a killer or something like that, the person that they abuse is not a real person in their head. And art has to make that victim a real person in their head in order for the art to work. And then when the criminal sees that, there's been studies about this, that they see that they're really hurting somebody. So if they have some empathy in them, they realize that they've committed a crime. Now, some people don't have empathy. Some people can look at other people getting fucked over, some small percentage, and they don't have the empathy that other human beings have. And in which case, they might not care about what they do.
So do you think, because I've never seen the scene that Rob got convicted for.
It wasn't a scene, it was a movie.
It was a movie.
Yeah.
Was the victim portrayed in a way that you felt empathy for her?
Man, I didn't watch the whole movie.
Okay.
I only saw parts of it.
Okay.
It was like some boot camp thing where the girls were treated kind of rough.
Right.
And this idea of treating people rough, and the dynamic of human sexuality is such that women like powerful men.
Right.
So there is some people that have, women have rape fantasies, women have fantasies about powerful men being strong with them, and they know explicitly, I mean, Dana's better to talk about this than I am.
Right.
It's, I don't have any credibility
Right.
talking about this. I'm a guy, right?
Right.
I'm not supposed to talk about it.
No, you're not.
But-
You're not incorrect at
But,
all.
but those things exist in the world.
Right.
They're very strong. Women are attracted to that kind of porn, and they know it's fiction, but it works with the psychology to be attracted to a powerful man. So it can work sexually for them. How it works sexually, why it works sexually, I'm not sure. I'm just talking about the facts.
Right.
About what exists in the world.
How do you feel about the suggestion that people make that you're encouraging men to actually engage in rape with those videos?
That is an interesting question. I think in the end it has to be determined empirically. And what I have heard from every study, I think, I don't know every study, I'm not like a statistician or something like
Yeah.
that, but the most convincing study about porn was one that was done in the mid-2000s when the internet was being adopted. And now violent crimes have been going down since the 90s, unexpectedly, by the way, because in the 90s they did the crime bill and also everybody thought it was going to be horrible. My theory, stupidly, perhaps, is that because baby boomers got older,
Right.
and they were the bulk of the population, there was less young people to commit crimes.
Right.
But that
Makes
might be
sense.
wrong,
Right.
whatever. These are empirical questions. So the empirical question was, does porn create violence in society? And that's a valid question to ask, I think. And what was found in this study was that you could examine states where the percentage of people that started using the internet and looking at porn, it didn't happen in every state at the same time. Some states adopted, like in the Eastern Seaboard or whatever, these states started adopting the internet faster. People started looking at the internet faster. And crime was dropping all across the country. But crime dropped faster in those states where people started looking at porn on the internet sooner.
What kind of crime are we talking about? Are we talking
Violent crime, property crime,
Okay.
rapes, sexual abuse.
sexual crime?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's an empirical question. There might be other studies that should be done. This is an empirical question. And violent video games, it's an empirical question. Do they
Right.
encourage violence? Because my son is looking at first-person shooter games and whatever, and he tends to not like them that much, but, he does sometimes, and he talks about it. And I was a kid, and we had toy guns and stuff. My son's got Nerf guns, and he plays with them. Does this encourage violence, guns like that?
Right.
I'm not sure. It is an empirical question. So maybe more studies will come out. I don't think they're going to be in contradiction to the past studies that have been done. And I think that if you're going to assert that violent video games or porn causes sexual abuse, then you have to show that it causes sexual abuse. You can't just assert it.
Right.
And they're wrong.
Right.
on the
I mean,
studies.
so I know that, the kind of stuff that I generally shoot tends to not be super hardcore. But I do know that, Evil Angel does some pretty, you guys
So
shoot
this is another, yeah, sure.
you guys
we
do
should-
some pretty intense stuff, but I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's always like consent. Like, do you go through two strides to make sure that the girl shows some kind of consent? Because I know, like, for example, when I shoot for Mind Geek, all the time, if there's a scene where there's some kind of, I don't know, power dynamic, there always absolutely has to be some kind of scene, some kind of sentence, something in there that shows that the girl is consenting to whatever is happening, for like a safety issue, just to
So-
make sure that do you guys institute the same thing?
Okay, so first off, up until just a couple years ago, everything that we sold, other than what I produced, was not owned by me. It was shot by independent producers.
Correct.
But I always talked to the new directors that there can be no casting couch at Evil Angel. There's no exchange, quid pro quo, I'll put you in a movie, if you fuck me, whatever. That I don't want to have you behave that way. I never want to hear about a scandal where you've abused a girl, where you've said something to a girl and then pushed the limits or something like that, and then had the girl be unhappy. If something like that happens, it's a problem. And I don't know that it's ever happened at Evil Angel. There were some allegations against Brian Gosling, and then they were withdrawn and stuff like that. And he's really articulate. about this, and he talks to the girl, and sometimes he doesn't shoot scenes because if he doesn't feel like the girl is with the program. But this crazy idea that Evil Angel shoots all this strong stuff is not coming from people who actually watch Evil Angel porn. It's coming from most other people who have this idea because it is true. I've shot some really strong scenes with Rocco and Nacho, especially in the early 2000s. Most of the stuff we shoot today is not got really strong stuff. And besides, what does it you even mean by strong stuff? Getting turned on by a slap on the face or something like that? Is that what you mean
Yeah, I'm talking
by that?
like more
Is
like
it the
rougher
attitude?
scenes.
It's the attitude of a power dynamic or something like that, which is fantasy, which is just like, looking at a video game or something like that where there's violence or something like that. We actually don't have violence. You can't have anybody tied up. We have rules in place where if it looks like a girl is uncomfortable and not happy, it's flagged by our QC department. We have probably the most extensive QC department in the business. I don't know of anybody who puts as many resources into QCing that we have. So it's either flagged, or if somebody's being choked, if it's for a pleasant sexual reason, it's definitely okay. But if the girl looks unhappy, it's flagged and it's looked at. And we just don't put those scenes out. I did have a scene where a girl was choked, where she said, "I want to be choked," and the guy wanted to choke her, and they did it to the point where, well, she doesn't pass out or anything like that, but I mean, it was stronger than I had ever shot before. So I was a little concerned, and I talked to them about it, but they said they really wanted to do it. So we put it in there. I don't want to say it's normal, but it's a little stronger than average. Is it acceptable and sexual? I think it's a discovery as part of the vocabulary of sexual turn-on that we found that choking somebody a little bit works sexually for people. I've had girls grab my hand and put my hand on their throats.
Oh, I know
I
a
had
lot of
no
girls who are
idea.
into that.
It's a very common thing,
Right.
and there's these whole misconceptions about people who do this and whatever. There are no new girls that come onto an Evil Angel set and that are surprised by how strong the scene is, because we don't hire new girls and then expect them to do a strong scene. That just doesn't happen. I mean, give me some examples of that happening. There aren't any. Every time a scene is stronger, and these don't happen hardly at all anymore, not in the last 15 years even. When Rocco was in his prime and I shot the first Fashionistas and the second Fashionistas in 2006, some of those were really strong scenes, but they were all talked about in detail. This is what I want to have happen. Melissa Loren wanted to have a sex scene with Nacho Vidal when he was at his prime. And we knew that there was going to be some slapping in it, and there was going to be some rougher stuff, and it was going to be power play. That was the whole idea of the scene. That was the first thing I talked to her about. I saw you slap this guy. Are you into that kind of stuff? And we talked at length about this character and what this person would do. I don't shoot just normal stuff. I shoot like 1 or 2 movies a year. In the last 5 years, it's been like 1.5 movies a year. And so when I shoot, it's always with people that have worked before. That's me personally. When other people shoot, I can't say how they deal with brand new girls, except there aren't rough things happening in those scenes.
Right. Okay. Well, I guess this could lead us to the Cam Girls question.
Yes.
So now I watched some of the scenes. So I had Ginger Banks on a couple of weeks
Yes.
ago, and those girls are not new to porn in the sense that they're both cam girls and they're both successful cam girls, her and Jenny Blige, but they are new to pro porn, and they did their first pro porn scenes with you guys. So would you consider those girls new? Because you said earlier
Yes,
you would.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So the 2 scenes in question that were brought up were the threesome with Manuel, Jenny, and Ginger, which Ginger said that she enjoyed. She thought it was like one of the best scenes that she'd ever done. I think after the fact, Jenny felt that it was harder or stronger, I guess as you say, than she expected. And she was told that she was going to do a vanilla scene. I guess she didn't think that was a vanilla scene.
So
How do you feel
let's
about
look at
that?
this context.
Okay.
I suspect that the scene was I mean, Manuel Ferrara does a really good scene, and it's really sexual, and that probably there was some stuff in there that she was not that comfortable with. Looking at the scene, she looks comfortable with it all.
Yeah.
She looks like she's really into it.
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of hard to like say it was a bad scene or that she was uncomfortable when she doesn't look uncomfortable.
I
When
watched it myself and I agree with you.
Ginger Banks said, I never got any sense of that. However, right after the scene, I'm told later that she did express that this was a little stronger than what I had anticipated and wanted to do. But she was told before the scene, during the scene, anything happens that you don't like, please stop. So what are we supposed to do at that point
Right.
when she doesn't appear to be uncomfortable? She's been told, please stop the scene if something is happening that you don't like, and yet she doesn't do that.
Right.
Isn't it insulting and condescending to a woman to say that you don't have control of your faculties when it's obvious that you do to our perception?
Right.
And then we say, well, you don't actually know yourself. We know better, or we think you're hiding. When doesn't that disrespect the woman to say that we know better for your safety than you personally do? I mean, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand what you mean, and I've found myself in situations as well where, you know, I think I can read a girl and how she feels, but I'm not entirely sure. And, you know, I do tell them before the scene, always. I'm like, you can always do, you know, stop the scene if you're uncomfortable, anything like that. And I think that, you know, sometimes I wonder if sometimes girls just don't like really know what they're getting into. Maybe they think that they can handle a certain thing and they can't, and then they don't feel like they can speak up in that moment. And I also wonder too if this whole idea, and do you think that like, you know, the whole idea of winning like, you know, AVN or XBiz Performer of the Year or something like that, usually the girls who win those awards are girls who do really hardcore intense scenes. Do you think that sometimes people look at someone like Angela White or Katrina Jade, you know, girls who really enjoy these rough scenes and who really flourish in those kinds of scenarios and feel like I want to get those accolades, I want to be famous like that girl, I've got to do those kinds of scenes even though maybe I'm not actually comfortable with it, but I feel like that's what I need to do to get there. And they don't like recognize that until after the fact.
I'm not sure that that is the correct interpretation, but maybe. I mean, certainly in any kind of personal relationship that you have with someone, in sex or not sex, and all the time in not sex, we don't always express our discomfort in a situation because
Right.
we want to go along, we don't want to cause problems or something like that.
Right.
If not going along means that we're going to be physically hurt, then that's a difficult thing. You certainly never want that to happen. And in fact, no one has been physically hurt in an Evil Angel scene that I'm aware of. It happens sometimes that people go further than what they think they can handle, and they're a little bit hurt for a while. Not a lot hurt that I know. I hate even drawing a line at a little hurt, a lot hurt. You know, what
Yeah.
the fuck? You don't want somebody to be hurt.
Right.
But sometimes people will go along in order to not make trouble.
Right.
So the whole idea of porn is that you're capable as a performer of deciding for yourself what you're going to do, and that you're capable of speaking up, because no one's tied up and having sex while tied up and gagged or something like that, because we don't sell that kind of stuff at Evil Angel.
Right.
And I'm not going to say people who do that are really bad people, like at Kink or whatever, they've done that. I mean, there's lots of consent problems dealt with in advance
Right.
where people are knowledgeable of that.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to realize that sex is a physical act, and you can't possibly talk about every little thing. Oh, his hand's going to go here, and then his hand's going to go there, and then we're going to go there, and then maybe if it's a little too hard, you got to stop it, or maybe you won't want to stop it, and stuff like that. I don't know. How are we supposed to know if you don't tell us? Are you in full control of your capacities? In other words, are you not drunk off your ass or something like that when you're doing the scene? And that would be improper to shoot that scene. And I
Right.
have talked to people about not shooting girls that are high on drugs and stuff like that, because then they don't have the capacity to show consent. but it's all based on consent. And my life, not just in porn, but my life since high school, when I realized that I needed to, like, not be a petty thief. I was a little bit of a shoplifter or whatever. My neighbors, they were seminary students to become priests. They said it was okay to steal stuff. I went along with it. And then I realized I feel guilty about this. I don't want to do this. So, I don't know, I broke up with my first girlfriend and I decided I just don't want to feel guilty about anything.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just not comfortable. It's not worth it.
Right.
So that is what I've lived by. Now, the revelation that some people interact in ways that are not completely honest. I've learned a lot about that. And I've certainly learned a lot about the fact that the male-female dynamic is not the same as the male-male dynamic.
Right.
And I've certainly been criticized for interrupting. If I interrupted you too much here, I might have. I don't know. I'm really sorry.
You're
I
fine.
can't help myself. I interrupt men too sometimes. It's horrible. But it's worse if it comes from the fact that you don't respect the other person, like a female, whatever. So the real question is, are you sensitive to the person? And are you giving them the ability to say no when they want to say no? And I have always striven to do that. And I have seen bad producers who talk behind the performer's back and say, well, I really kind of want to do this. Maybe we can just push it a little bit harder or something like that and get that. Even though they don't really want to do it, I want to get it out of them anyway. I have explicitly not wanted to do that. And
Right.
this didn't start this year or last year. This started when I first started shooting movies. This is part of my personality. I find it unnecessary to put all this out in writing, but I can see how some people feel that it is necessary, because it is true that when you hire a director, you don't have intimate knowledge of how their brain works all the time.
Right.
And it's better if it's written down.
Right.
So I understand that. But I do feel like I've talked with my directors. One of the things I say to my directors all the time, especially when we were doing well and we were making a lot of money, it's like, you got to understand, you're negotiating the price with the girl and what she's going to do all the time. And she might be relatively new in the business, only done it 2 or 3 times. Maybe it's the first time she's done it. You've done it 100 times, 1,000 times. You're better at it
Right.
than they are.
Right.
So pay them a little extra. Go out of your way to make sure that they're comfortable. And I've been saying that all my career.
Have you thought about instituting something like, because I've talked to some other girls about consent, because I feel like it's a big issue now, in the adult industry, especially with the way that like social media has given girls a platform to really voice their opinions, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. And, obviously with the Me Too movement coming around and women feeling more empowered to speak their minds and talk about, if they're in an uncomfortable sexual situation, there's been discussion about actually literally creating like a written checklist where you're like, okay, I don't want to be slapped, but I don't mind being spanked. I don't want to be spit on, but I don't mind a finger in my butthole. Like, have you thought about bringing something like that onto set to like really have an incredibly clear?
Well, how many of those items are? Because we do talk about those things all
do
the time. There's an understanding. We never go into a scene saying, well, just do whatever you want.
Right.
Unless the girl says, just do whatever you want.
So did you
I'll
have that-
tell you if I want to stop.
Did you have that discussion before? Do you know? I know you weren't there that day, but the before the threesome started, did they have that discussion of do's and don'ts?
I don't know what happened in terms of do's and don'ts. I
Okay.
do know that they talked about them being comfortable with the scene.
Okay.
But I know that secondhand because I
Right.
wasn't there.
Right.
So I don't know exactly how the words were exchanged.
Okay.
I do know that I never became aware of any of these problems and that none of it was mentioned on social media or anything until the box cover came out for the movie. And Jenny wasn't on the cover. And then all this problem happened months later than when the scene was happening.
Right.
And the revelation that there was a conversation between Ginger and Chris, who was the producer director of the movie, and who said no, that she expressed that she didn't want to be touched.
Right. Okay. So now we're moving on to
The
talk
only
about the scene that you directed, the butt man,
the
girl,
only
girl. Okay.
conversation I had was, I want them to look at this scene I had just won an award for with Kissa and where I touch their tits a little bit and grab their ass.
Right.
That's it, you know, and I said, well, I want them to know that that's what's going to happen. We're going to shoot a scene like that. That's what's going to happen in the scene. And they acknowledged that they had watched the scene, and they were okay with that. That's all I knew.
Okay.
Now,
So because
what
Ginger
actually happened,
explicitly said that
Correct.
she asked
Correct.
Chris if you were going to touch her, and Chris told her no.
and Chris had told me that that conversation didn't happen.
So how do you think
So,
that incredible
One person or
that
another,
miscommunication
it
happened?
might have simply been a misunderstanding. Certainly, anything that happened in the scene, I thought the girls were in full control of their facilities while I was shooting because nobody was drunk, nobody was stoned or
Right.
anything like that. And everything, all the touching, I grab her ass twice and I grab her tits once.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happened. There was no touching off camera or anything like that.
Right.
It's all there on video, so you can see to the extent of it, which is pretty mild. Nobody got hurt. There was nothing rough about it. It was just like, it was completely my desire to make a better scene
Right.
because it was a first-time girl-girl scene for these girls.
Right.
And I was trying to,
And that is
accent their
your
sexiness.
thing, and that is the character that you play.
Exactly.
But somehow they were under the impression that they were explicitly told you would not touch them, but you did, and then you were never told that they expressed that desire, or that was,
Correct.
so there's like this huge gap of misinformation.
Yeah.
Do you,
But they did say they had seen the scene that I said we were going to shoot.
Right.
Like this scene, and that was what was going to happen, and they acknowledged that that was okay.
right,
So that was what I was operating under. I believe that was what Chris was operating under. And if that wasn't the case, we should have been told. In any case, if Ginger was under a misunderstanding with that regard, maybe we should have talked about it more explicitly. Certainly what happened was so mild and not physically injurious. Was it invasive? Perhaps it was, and perhaps it should have been talked about. Certainly in today's day and age, I talk about it more. I mean,
Right.
I do ask the girls if I can touch. I say, well, is it okay if I do this? Sometimes I do it on camera in the scene, but I expect them to say no if
Right.
they don't. But, you know, it's not like this is an intimidating environment when I'm shooting. This is a very casual thing, and I'm trying to bring out their personality and have them be honest, because my goal is never to do predictable. I'll tell girls, don't just agree with me. Don't say yes to everything. I want you to be real and to react in the way that you normally would, which is what I talk to the girls about doing.
but you see that it could be possibly intimidating that a girl would say no to you on camera, you
Or
know,
yes to me on
in
camera.
that, or yeah, I bet, I mean, I could see, you know, I mean, you're Jon Stagliano, like you know, you carry a lot of, you know, reputation and the legacy of being like a very important figure in the adult industry. And so, and I think that a lot of times, you know, girls, when they have the camera is on and it's recording, you feel like you should slide into this character that you're supposed to portray. So if something happens that you're uncomfortable with, I think I would feel like the last thing I would want to say is no, because that just made everything weird. I mean, I would,
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe talking about the fact that we can cut out any of that interaction
yeah,
is not understood, and
Right.
maybe Ginger didn't understand that. So certainly with a new girl, it's more understandable.
Right.
That somebody who has not shot professional scene before, they might not understand that, well, if you just say no, stop, we'll cut the whole thing out.
Right.
Our goal is to make you look good. I
Right.
did talk to them about how the goal of the scene was to make you look good and be sexy, but they possibly didn't understand that.
so you were obviously very surprised.
Yeah, and none of this happened. None of it came out until months later,
Right.
which I think is important to note.
Yeah. Has this changed your mind about maybe like how you're going to conduct scenes in the future? Like, are you considering like being overly communicative, maybe having a checklist like I talked about, or maybe just
We're all not overly, I wouldn't say overly. We all communicate more now because of the context. The context is today.
right?
And the context is that men treat women differently. The fact is, to this day, I probably make mistakes. Certainly, my wife will be reminding me constantly of all the mistakes that I make. And my
Right.
daughter the other day, when I said, no, you shouldn't do that, and she said, Dad, you didn't ask me. And it's like, oh, fuck. Now
Yeah.
you're 18. I guess I'm supposed to ask you everything.
Yeah.
And we can't open the windows at the hotel because I didn't realize you didn't want us to have fresh air. I don't know. That was exactly what happened. And she
Yeah.
said, but Dad, you didn't ask me. And I said, I didn't think. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Come on. It's like if it was really injurious or potentially injurious, I would have asked you, but it wasn't.
Right. Do you ever feel like a little bit of like a fish out of water with the new, I don't know, with the new way that, with society, I guess, and the way that it is now, and with the Me Too movement, and with social media, and with, porn performers like having more and more agency? Do you ever feel like, I don't know, maybe a little bit more nervous?
Yeah, we're all more concerned because women have a greater voice.
Yeah.
So the consequences of a misunderstanding are far greater. And that's a
Right.
good thing.
Right, right,
That's a
right.
very good thing, that the consequences are greater. I think it's very important that people speak up for themselves and feel empowered to do that. And society has moved in that direction. So in response to that, talking about potential problems are important,
Okay.
are more important than they were before.
You
And
just wish that this had been
I,
communicated to you before you put the DVD out, I would imagine.
yeah, I guess. I don't know. I mean, the fact is, I mean, I don't even remember the timing of when the DVD came out, to tell you the truth,
Or the
in
scene just came
relation
out.
to any problems.
Right.
The box cover came out and Jenny wasn't on the cover and she complained. Rightly so, I might say. It
Who was on the cover? Was it
There
just
was
Ginger?
no cover. No person was on the cover. It
Oh,
was
okay.
just crazy. And it didn't sell very well. Possibly because of that. So, and I can certainly understand if I was Jenny, who was really beautiful.
Yeah.
I would say, oh God, I thought I was going to be on the cover and then
Yeah.
I'm
I mean,
not,
it's the only pro porn scene that she ever shot,
Yeah,
and
so
as she said,
I'm
will ever shoot.
totally sympathetic towards her point of view.
Yeah.
And I was not running the company actively at the time. Other people were, and I was simply filling in as the owner, and I wasn't making that decision. I approved it, but I wasn't involved in the creation of the box cover or anything. I just said, they asked me, is it okay to put the box cover out like this with nobody's picture on the cover? I say, yeah, it's an interesting idea. If you think it's the best thing, I'm not going to override you on this.
Right.
I did override them sometimes, but I didn't choose to override them on that.
Right.
So,
Okay, so I have some questions for my Patreon members that Dana Vespoli actually answered. She was going to come on today, but she wasn't feeling well, so she did send us her answers to some of these questions, and I think they're really well done. So I'm going to read them, and if you want to comment on them at all. So Sam Lewis asked, in an industry that's under the social and societal microscope as porn is, along with social media giving performers so much more of a voice and independence than any other time in porn, why do John and Dana think the realm of do's and don'ts aren't more solidified outside of a few specific sites and directors? So Dana said, I think it's an ongoing process. I know that Erica Lust has a performer bill of rights that is handed out to talent on set, and of course, Kink.com has a do's and don'ts checklist. A lot of studios ask the talent to discuss do's and don'ts before the scene and believe it to be sufficient because I suppose it has been enough thus far until it isn't anymore. So I guess this just kind of like asks the question again, would you ever consider like an actual written checklist? Or do you think that that's too much?
I think oh God, I feel like a politician right now.
Because I can understand like
Yes,
how,
I've considered a written checklist. No, I'm not sure. I'm going to answer the question first, and then
Okay.
I'm going to do my segue like a politician
Okay.
to something else. 'Cause I hate it when they don't say yes or no at the beginning after the question. It's always been important to me that people are on the same page, that what's happening, everybody's consistent with. And to tell you the truth, I don't think of women as not being able to decide for themselves what they want to do. I think that's sexist in itself. And to imply that a woman is not capable of saying yes or no to a thing is condescending to that woman. Now, it is true, and we all know in interpersonal relationships that sometimes because of the cost of saying it, like making people uncomfortable or whatever, or maybe the scene should be good and I don't know if I want to do it or not because I'm uncertain, I don't like those situations. I've never liked them. I've stopped performers all the time. But the fact is, Rocco used to do stronger scenes in front of my camera, and I'd always be saying, "You sure she wants you to spit on her or something like that?" Or no, let's not do that. And then at some point in time, I realized every single time I've stopped it, the girl has said, no, I'm okay with it. And Rocco's really sensitive to the girl. So I let it go, but I watched the situation much more closely when he's being a little bit stronger with the girl. But all this stuff is not outside the norm, and it's not like they're surprises or anything. But that's another point. Surprises are what happens all the time in real life in interactions with people.
Yeah.
So if you're going to enter society and leave the womb of the home, you have to be able to say yes or no to what you're doing and what you want to do. And it's assumed that you're capable of doing that.
Right. And that actually brought up a question that Hannah Hannah Vega asked. And she said, here we go. Many of Evil Angel's featured directors and performers have produced remarkable bodies of work that have challenged and elevated traditional depictions of porn. I want to just add in here that you guys were one of the first companies to start mixing trans porn in with quote unquote mainstream porn. And that is something that was kind of taboo for a long time, but everyone has adopted now. So that's something that I feel like we should make sure that everybody knows, because Evil Angel's been very progressive in that way.
We're progressive. Yes, we're politically correct. Actually, we're just horny guys. Oh, that's a turn on. Why can't we do it? Because other people don't do it. I don't know, because society doesn't like it, but we don't care what other people think in society, so we're just going to do it anyway, which is what happened in '98 when Joey came to me with the idea. He said he wanted to shoot trans porn. He said, will you sell it? And I said, yeah, why not? I don't know. But I had been infected by a trans person,
Right.
and I think he was a little concerned because of that. But that was purely my own doing and irresponsibleness that
Right.
that caused that, and I
Right.
really think it wasn't relevant to this situation.
Right,
So,
right. So to continue her question, some of these content creators have been accused of violating their scene partner's consent. In the world of porn, especially rougher or hardcore porn, these same individuals are elevated and rewarded. Their fellow hardcore performers respect them and can choose to continue working with them. I'm thinking along the lines of James Dean and Casey Calvert in the movie Consent that we talked about earlier, Manuel, Marcus Dupree, and Angela White. To what extent are these instances of non-consent just cases of inexperienced performers not understanding their scene partner's style beforehand? Or are certain performers less vocal and just not effective communicators for whatever reason, trauma or fear in the moment with their scene partner?
first of all, the first thing right at the beginning, there's the assumption that people's consent has been violated on Evil Angel scenes. Give me some examples, because I'm not aware of them. Because I can't answer any of the other questions.
Right.
Because they are all assuming that that's happened on an Evil Angel set, and I'm not aware of that happening.
Well, I think she's probably pointing to the Ginger interview.
Okay.
Because she's
Do you want me to say something else about that?
No, I
particular
think
thing?
I
don't
think
know.
you've made your
Yeah.
point there. Yeah. It
Yeah.
was a miscommunication. For some reason, there was a huge gap in what she thought was happening and what you thought were happening. So, but I mean, ultimately what she said is that her consent was violated. So I think that is what she's pointing to. So I guess her question really is that case a situation of an inexperienced performer not understanding their scene partner style beforehand? I think that could probably be more pointed to the threesome, Jenny's feeling about the threesome situation. Her not understanding Manuel's style, I guess.
It's probably impossible to understand everything about what's going to happen in a scene, because
Right.
there's so many individual things that happen. It's possibly true that it could have been anticipated that her problems could have been talked about more in advance. And today we will certainly talk about those things. I mean, her main issue was with the fact that Ginger squirts or something like that. And some
Yeah.
of the squirt is on Manuel's fingers, and then he puts his fingers in her mouth or something like that. I don't know. I think that was her particular issue. And that particularly will be talked about. I'm sure it's talked about all the time now. But it's kind of hard to predict all of those things and whether or not they'll happen. First off, you don't even know if a girl's going to squirt or whatever. And then
Right.
I don't know what I would have done in that situation myself as a cameraman, but I wasn't the cameraman on that set. And because because Jenny was brand new and Ginger were brand new in that situation, a higher degree of caution I've always exhibited with brand new people. And I know in Manuel's heart that he was not purposely trying to do something that Jenny would not like. In fact, he was trying to do the opposite. He was trying to do things that she would like.
Right.
And I take offense at the implication that me or Manuel or any director at Evil Angel is purposely trying to do something that offends or pushes a girl to do something that she doesn't want to do. That is an offensive concept to me. Prove it, because that's what you're saying. That's
Right.
what you're implying by these implications. So those require some proof. And since nobody's been hurt on an Evil Angel set or talked about being hurt in a way where they were forced to do something, I don't say that somebody hasn't done anal sex and wound up being down for a few days or whatever because they pushed themselves too hard or because things went a little harder than they anticipated. Certainly that can happen and probably has happened. But no director has consciously hurt a girl on a set because that's what they wanted to do or
Right.
for any reason whatsoever.
Right.
I certainly would never tolerate that, not in myself or not in another director. So if you imply it, please give us an example and talk about it some more, or don't imply it because that's improper.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds just like it's all about a lack of communication.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's all there on video.
Right.
You can look at her reaction. You can look at me touching her butt.
I
And
watched it. It
so,
doesn't
yeah.
it doesn't appear to be, you know, a scene where anybody appears uncomfortable, but of course it's impossible to know what's going on in somebody's head when that's happening. And like I said before, like I understand your position. It's like, you know, I kind of ride both sides because, like, as a woman, I understand what it's like to be in a situation where maybe you're uncomfortable, but you're uncomfortable saying you're uncomfortable. And then, like, in retrospect, you look at it and you think, God, I should have said something. And Ginger said that as much as well. She said, you know, I really should have said something at that moment. I should have stood up for myself at that moment. I just, you know, I couldn't. I just couldn't process it at the moment. So she does, you know, take some responsibility for that. But then also too, as a producer, I understand not being able to read somebody's mind, and I understand like not knowing exactly what they're thinking. And then if everything looks fine and everybody seems happy, you're going to assume everything is fine. And unless somebody says something to you at the moment or maybe directly afterwards, how can you anticipate that they're going to be unhappy with that scene? So I understand your position as well. So I don't know what the answer
Well,
is.
Ginger felt that her personal space was violated, and that is the
Right.
explicit issue that we're talking about. When people,
Right.
and I didn't want to violate her personal space. I had no desire to. I didn't want to force myself on her. I got no pleasure out of doing that, but perhaps it does happen that some people enjoy doing that.
Right. Right. Let's see what else. Okay, so this was a question for Dana. I know Dana Vespoli has a long-standing work relationship with John. I also know that she was married to Manuel and they co-parent. As a female director and performer with close personal relationships to these two men in particular, how did she deal with these allegations? Did she have talk with both of these men over these incidents? I'm particularly interested in how she felt upon hearing that the father of her children allegedly violated another woman. Also, to what extent does she think these same alleged occurrences could happen on a female-directed set? And then she goes on by saying, I do not want these questions to seem like I am bashing Evil Angel or any of the aforementioned performers. In fact, most of Evil Angel's top directors and performers have my utmost admiration. It is just so complicated when these same people are accused of violating, bystanding, or non-reacting. So Dana says, indeed, it is very complicated, and most folks weighing in are either failing to recognize how nuanced it is or are obfuscating the issue. Wow, that we just came across a word.
Obfuscating.
We just came across a word I didn't know.
Obfuscating. It's a
Oh
good
my
word.
God, that made me
word.
feel stupid. I am, of course, aware of the allegations against both Manuel and John. I am also aware that saying I've known both of them for over 16 years and have never experienced or witnessed nefarious actions from either of them can be construed as me being either complicit or bystanding. And finally, I am aware that not commenting on said allegations can be interpreted as me non-reacting. I suppose you can take your pick, as this is essentially a no-win situation. As for whether or not these same or similar allegations could happen on a female-directed set, they do and they have.
Well, let's just break this down for a second. Manuel was doing a scene. We'll talk about his scene since it was arguably more strong than my situation,
Right.
but it applies the
Right.
same way. So you're saying that Jenny, who was in the scene, who knew what sex was surprised by something that happened, even though she didn't act surprised. So there was no way we could tell
Right.
that she was surprised. And that somehow went along with it because she felt intimidated. Isn't it? I mean, the whole porn industry is based on consent.
Right.
It's based on the fact that there's nobody being brought in, captured into slavery and then forced to make a
Right.
porn scene.
Right.
I mean, none of that happens. And
Right.
certainly not, I mean, maybe it's happened somewhere sometime. Maybe snuff films have been made. I don't know. But we certainly don't deal with that in our part of the business. So you're saying that this woman, Jenny, was in a situation where she felt intimidated and wanted to do a good scene and went along with it. How much of that mind reading should we be required to do in a scene? Because even if you have a checklist on everything that happens, you can't possibly put down every little thing that happens in a sex scene.
Right.
You can put down a lot of stuff, and probably you could put down what happened in that scene. But it'd be really hard to come
Yeah.
up with every scenario. So what you have to assume in order to say that she was, in fact, assaulted or something in that situation was that she was not capable of consenting to that. And I think that's demeaning to women to say that if you're not capable of making a decision for yourself about what's going on, and if you weren't capable of understanding what was happening, that's insulting and demeaning to a woman, isn't it? That's my personal way of I can certainly understand why somebody would say that, but I would certainly try and encourage my children to not put themselves in that situation. And certainly, if it was involving violence and where there was a potential of getting hurt and you didn't speak up when you could be hurt, that would be a bad thing.
Right.
What comes to mind is my daughter got out of this fucking thing. We were driving on the beach and there was a little bit of a tilt and she said, "Dad, I'm scared. I don't want to drive this anymore." And so she got out. And I'm very happy that my daughter had the courage to say, "Dad, I'm scared. I don't want to be in this anymore."
Right. Right.
And let's just not do it. I mean, I assumed that she had the ability to do that. And certainly in the context of a family, whatever, it's more comfortable for somebody to do that. But if you're going to assume that somebody is not capable of making a decision for themselves, that's insulting to the people making the decision.
Right. Right. I mean, I suppose all we can do is try to cultivate a set and an atmosphere where people feel comfortable and feel that they can, articulate if they're not feeling comfortable or they want to change something or didn't want to do something, and try to make sure that we have clear communication and talk about do's and don'ts. But I think ultimately this is, something that's probably going to happen again at some point. And I don't know. It's tricky. It's tricky. And it's tricky when you're dealing with sex too, because there's a lot, some people have a lot of issues around that. And I don't know. It's a difficult thing to navigate.
Issues, insecurities. Am I living up to the image of what other people think I should do? This happens
Right.
every day in all our interactions. It's going to happen today, probably.
Yeah, this is true.
And it's happened with me where I kept my mouth shut and maybe I regretted it later.
Right.
It has happened.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
but not in the case where I was actually going to get physically damaged or hurt. It's happened more in a situation where I've made the value judgment that going along was not that costly as that I would suffer permanent damage. And I think that is an assumption for most porn that's shot. I can't speak for other producers that might have some idea in their head that they want to push a girl and they want to see if she'll go along with it and won't say anything. That may happen. I don't want that to happen on Evil Angel sets. So I hope it doesn't happen, but knowing human nature, I suspect that it's probably happened.
Yeah.
and we'll just try and keep it to a minimum.
Yeah. Is there any is there anything that you would want to say to Ginger in particular if she was here?
Call me, talk to me. I don't know. I mean, what happened? I don't think that it's good to make allegations that you won't back up to the face of the person that you've made the allegations to. And that I really am sorry if she had a misunderstanding and that she felt that her personal space was violated. That was not my intent. And I was trying to do a good scene. And I thought we were all on the same page. And I thought the scene came out pretty good. I think people work really hard. And certainly that was the feeling we got on the set after the fact, was that we had done a pretty good scene for a first scene for girls that were not necessarily lesbians or anything, but they did a good scene and we had fun. But if I misunderstood something, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, John. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this. And I know it's an uncomfortable conversation to have, and we all want to go to set every day and have just performers that are on board and everybody's happy and has a great scene and everybody walks away with a big smile on their face. But this is an industry that can be kind of tricky sometimes, and these problems do come up, and especially when you've been working in it as long as you have, and as I have, I think these issues are going to come up, but I think it's important to talk about consent and to talk about communication, and it is an issue, and it is an important one, so I appreciate you coming on to talk about that.
Thank you very much.
And is there anything else that you want to talk
Well,
about?
I was quoted in Jezebel when we were talking about the movie that I was doing called Consent, and the writer quoted me, and I thought she had written it herself. I misremembered it. That's another word that's not really a word, but where I said something about, well, if there's a controversy and there's some difficulty, I run towards it instead of away from it, and that I can't say that I do that all the time, but I would like to do that all the time, and I think it's important to do that all the time.
Yeah, I agree. Can you tell everybody where they can find you on social media? I know
Oh my
that you are
God,
on Twitter.
I'm 67 years old. What's social media again? Oh, no, I don't want to be on Twitter. I have a Facebook page, but I haven't looked at it in years.
But you do have a Twitter.
And we do have a Twitter, and I have looked at my, is it DM, direct messages?
Yes.
I've read through them once or twice. I've even answered 2 of them, or 3. But not all of them. I'm sorry. Do I have to?
Well, how about Evil Angel? Evil Angel's got a social media presence.
I would say that if you go on the Twitter that has my name on it, because we've got a couple of, they gave me an account that had like 100,000 followers. I don't know what the hell we were thinking at the time that I thought maybe I would go on it. If there is a question, please posit it to my social media people, and I will get back to you and say, this is for John.
Okay.
And John will answer it. And anything anybody wants to say, I will answer those questions, and I will talk to my social media person right when we get out of here, and I'll say, if somebody says that they have a question for John, give it to me so I can answer it.
Okay.
Okay?
Where are they going to do that, though?
I don't know. Evil Angel Twitter. I don't know. Why
So
do I have to
at Evil
know this
Angel?
stuff? Yeah, okay. I can tell you what my email address is, and everybody will know. It's really hard. It's john@evilangel.com. So if you have a question, JOHN at evilangel.com. I'll probably have a lot more emails. Whatever, I have to delete it. I won't delete it. Just ask me the question. I'll look at my spam occasionally, too, and say, this is an important question for John. And I'll look at it, and I'll answer it. Anything. Please.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John. We really appreciate it. You guys can find me at Holly Randall on Instagram and on Twitter. John, thank you again for coming out and telling your side of what is a, kind of a difficult conversation, but I appreciate
No problem.
you having
Thank
it.
you very much.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.